Yeah, you did. French connection. Yeah, it's has two main roads on either side.
great work session today, and appreciate everybody's time being here. So thank you, everyone that's here today. At this point, we'll go ahead and agenda item for public comment is available, and it doesn't look like we had anyone sign up. So we'll move on to the third agenda item. It is the Heat Plan 2055 Transportation Plan Work Session, and Shannon actually will lead that for us. So, thank you guys for leading that. We're excited about learning more and work session.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Really appreciate everybody being here today, ready to work and hopefully learn also about Peak Plan 2055. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ashley with Stantec, who is part of our consultant team and leading the transportation plan element of our comprehensive plan. And she'll walk us through the order of business today.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. Yeah, and we want to inform you guys a little bit. I think you have maybe followed and hopefully come to some of our public forums that we've had for the comp plan. I know I've seen you there. And then also ask questions of you all. So we have a few interactive exercises, and then at the end we'll have an open discussion kind of over some of the plans here to figure out. We had like a download session with town staff to tell us, any issues, challenges that you've identified that need to go into the plan. You all will know other aspects of it as well through lived experience that hopefully you can then help inform the plan as well. And so what you'll see here in the agenda is those that are highlighted in orange is where we're going to stop and have a little discussion with you all. And so I'll go over what the sort of the plan is, where we're at in it. And then as part of the comp plan, we developed several goals, and they are around different concepts or different elements, and transportation is one of them. And so we have the one transportation goal for the overall comp plan, and the objectives that is what is printed out in front of you. And so if you have any comments, anything that we're missing, anything that you think should be added, whatever it might be, please jot it down and I'll collect those afterwards, but we also will have a discussion about it if you want to as well. And then we'll get into after this, we have, we're running analysis to roll up into those objectives. So how are we meeting those objectives? How are we measuring them? We have a little set of metrics that we've developed that we'll share with you to sort of understand the science behind how we're getting to the recommendations for these planned updates. And I'll just go ahead and skip ahead so you can dive in. So with the comprehensive plan, you all adopted this future land use plan and transportation plan. And so the comprehensive plan includes this, and transportation is going to be a huge part of it. But there's also other elements like parks, utilities, things like that as well that are involved in a comp plan. So we're updating some pieces, adding new pieces as well. And it's projecting out instead of 2045 as Advanced Apex did, we're looking out even further to 2055. And so again, these are all of those elements that are included in a comprehensive plan, and the transportation plan is basically rolled up into your comp plan. So with that Advanced Apex, you had a dedicated transportation plan. We don't want to lose that. So a huge part of the comprehensive plan is going to be the transportation side of it. And just highlighting that something that we did a little differently for this is typically you have land use. You guys all know what a land use map is. But then we are also doing place types. So that's a more general character areas as opposed to parcel by parcel land use. And those are really going to inform the transportation plan. So I'll get into that in a minute, but everything that we do as we talk about transportation is going to be filtered through the place types that are being developed through the comprehensive plan. So it's all about sort of land use character integration. So this is the planning process, and you'll see we're wrapping up phase 2 and getting into phase 3. And so in order to come up with those recommendations and present the preliminary findings at the public forum, which will be in the fall, we have to come up with those place types, land use plan, everything like that, and then run those analyses I was talking about and how they roll up into and respond to the objectives that you have in front of you. So this is the planning area. Hopefully you've seen this map by now, and it incorporates, not just the town, but some other elements as well to make sure that we're really getting, capturing mainly some of the areas to the south of US 1 and to the west as well. And so in that advanced Apex plan for 2045, these were the key elements of your transportation plan. So you have the thoroughfare and collector street map, the bike ped map, the transit map, and then typical street sections. And these all sort of filter down into project priorities. So they helped inform the projects that came out of these plans and then help prioritize them. And we are doing something slightly differently this time. So instead of having that thoroughfare collector street plan, we're actually going to do a street typology map. And this one, example one here, is for Raleigh. So it's going to be more context specific. So again, those place types that you'll see, it's going to respond really to the land use, the integrating of that and sort of the character of the areas that surround it. So instead of having your thoroughfare plan currently has, how many do you think it has? 12 different types of fewer okay. Fewer than that, the maps over there. But they don't really vary as they go in and out of maybe more dense areas to suburban to rural. And so really having it be more context sensitive and specific like that. And so in the beginning with this, we looked at existing conditions and also community input. So we've been in and out of Apex quite a few times to discuss with you all and the community as to how you think that Apex should grow and what it should look like by 2055. And this is that methodology that I talked about of how we set up the goal and the objectives. We're developing these metrics to measure success, doing the analysis, updating those plans and sections, and then those will feed down into actionable recommendations. And I said this, I think, to Jennifer at the beginning, but if anything is not computing, just stop me and let me know. We have a small group here, so just drop me at any point. And so with this goal and objectives, I wanted to take a second and just have you all look at either on screen, on the computer, or in the printout. And we kind of want to leave here with these being formally adopted or approved by you all. So if you can take some time to look at that today, or if you had anything in mind that we have to get integrated and incorporated in here, if you have any ideas on that, just let me know and we'll make sure that those are included in these. But I don't.
I think we should.
Yeah, go through all of them now. Do that open discussion now. Okay. And so the overall goal is to create a connected, safe, and efficient multimodal transportation network. So that's what we're going to be striving for all throughout the next 30 years, but also making sure that we're getting to that by 2055. And so for that first objective, we're going to expand access, and that's the key word there is access to safe, convenient, and reliable transportation choices for people of all ages and abilities, including walking, biking, transit, and driving. So for us, that is making sure that regardless of how you get around town, that your ability to access that is safe and convenient. Any comments or questions on that one?
Does that include e-biking?
Micromobility as a part of that. We don't have it specifically called out. We can discuss. We specifically added that. Do you have ordinances around allowing? I don't know if I've ever seen these.
There's some ordinances, but not a lot. I know there's talk at the state level of defining the 3 categories. We don't have, there've been discussions, but no, not much is formalized.
Okay.
At this point.
Okay.
In Apex.
Does this assume that there will or will not be passenger rail in the next 30 years?
Yes.
So our transit plan map assumes future passenger rail for the 2055 plan. And the place type recommendations also assume that we have premium transit service. That could be passenger rail, it could be something else. And we're still working on that, what those recommendations will be.
BRT or increased frequency, something along those lines.
So is the question whether the walking, biking, transit and driving is all encompassing enough or?
I guess I wanted to think bigger picture. What are you assuming about demographics? Certainly with the current bus, it is mostly extremely low income people and folks who have aged out of driving or have disabilities. So if we think of an expansion of bus and rail and all of that, at what point are you assuming over the next 30 years that ridership can expand? I think our community is just going to get more affluent and the lowest income people are going to keep getting displaced, which makes it hard to think about transit and a rail system that's going to attract riders. I think that's the big question to me, what your future predictions are for demographic change and then how that leads into propensity to ride.
Well, I think you'll see, and maybe we should go through the goals and then walk back through discussion. But I think that you'll see throughout the language that there's the intent, and this is consistent with the town strategic plan, is to be welcoming to all people, you know, of different demographics. So our goals and objectives would want to serve all people.
But do we have demographic projections on what percentage of the population is going to have income below 40,000 or comparable based on inflation 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years? Have we looked at that demographic? Or are you just saying it's irrelevant? We're going to be welcoming of anyone, whether anyone chooses to ride or not. I'm just really concerned about low ridership then being projected out into the future, given how incredibly expensive it is and that there's a lot of backlash from people who don't like how much we pay for an empty bus, right? I feel like that's got to be grappled with, the demographics of people who are likely to ride, how much it costs, and how cost effective it is to continue this plan, right? To do what we're doing now for another 30 years.
So we have looked at demographic trends, and there is an existing conditions report available on the Peak Plan website that dives into demographics to the extent that we can. When you're projecting out, it's more, what does the past tell us, you know, that we can assume might continue for the future? We can't really project out income and race and ability, that sort of thing. So it doesn't completely answer your question. And I have not heard from public input, and maybe I'm not understanding what you're saying exactly, but that we would scale back transportation options because of the demographics of the community. Is that what you're suggesting?
I think that the type of fixed route bus that we have now, it has really low ridership. And I think that as people who are low income continue to be displaced, this is 100% true on my street. All of the renters are gone. It used to be someone who had a $500 a month shared house, and now it's the only renting option is $4,000 a month, right? There's a complete displacement, and I'm in the greater downtown area, that who's going to be riding bus? I don't think as the town becomes more and more affluent that we're going to capture that group on a bus. Like even if it's a rapid transit bus or it's a full length bus, I mean, it's just hard to imagine something other than an equally empty bus 10 years from now. Do people sort of understand what I'm saying?
Understand what you're saying. If I may, though, I think maybe we're getting a little bogged down. If perhaps we could go through what the presentation and then perhaps come back to those questions. Would that be okay?
Sure.
With you? Because I'm afraid we'll get down this rabbit hole of demographics and never understand what the group is prepared for us.
I was going to say, I agree, because the only thing that I would say is all of what you're saying is true, but the counter to that is trends of people becoming especially lower demographics, not being car owners, and a trend toward either carpooling, driverless cars, all of those factors are kind of creating a separate trend of socioeconomics aside. A lot of trends show there will be fewer cars on the road. And so if there's fewer cars on the road, then there's got to be alternatives to transportation regardless of economics. So, but I agree, we should go through the rest of the slides.
Okay, I'll add one thing to that, is that everything that we come up with after these is going to be filtered through those place types. And so we have areas that we are proposing as mixed use, higher density. So we went through the whole scenario planning to figure out how Apex wanted to see itself grow in the future, kind of status quo with single family homes. That was sort of one option. And then the other option was to densify in certain areas along certain major corridors like NC 55. And then that would allow more open space, more rural living, things like that serve as the counter. And so when you have more density along some of these corridors, it will be more transit supportive, and there will be a higher density or concentration of people, which then makes transit more viable in those areas. So we're trying to be transit supportive in what we're creating for the future so that choice riders, more of them will be riding transit along with transit dependent riders. So the hope is you will see an increase in transit ridership in the future. That helps them. And so this first one mainly about access. The second one to improve connectivity between residential areas, employment centers, schools, parks, and commercial areas to reduce congestion and travel delays. This is more getting into vehicles, so the connectivity. So do we have enough roadway, or if we have enough connections, enough intersections so people can safely get across or access the places that they need to get to, enough those connectors out onto the arterial roadways. Mainly is congestion an issue, and how do we help alleviate it? And then for the third one, incorporate design elements from public and private initiatives that improve safety and visibility for all transportation, lighting, crossing, traffic calming, and distances, anticipate new or future public transit technologies. So this is getting into the safety side of things. So we have the Apex Vision Zero plan, learning from the high injury network and agencies that have been done there to help improve and diminish crashes, either with vulnerable roadway users and or in vehicles. And how might we improve that through things like lighting, more crossings, and traffic calming. One second. Can you click it down? Yeah. Yeah. So this fourth one, integrate sidewalks, bike facilities, street trees, greenways, bus stops, mobility hubs, and other supportive elements as core components of a functional multimodal transportation system. So really that's getting into the functional multimodal transportation system. So how do we introduce facilities and infrastructure for all of these modes and integrate them together in a way that makes sense, so that it's connecting to one another? You don't have a greenway happening over here and only a select few communities can access it, and then it's not getting you anywhere or something like that, making sure that it's all working together. What's a street tree? What's a street tree? Any sort of the regimented trees that you see along a roadway. So every 20, 35 feet, however you want to do it, where you have a tree planted sort of between the sidewalk and the roadway. You see them a lot in more urban areas.
And they're very difficult. So it's not just, why don't we do this? It's a smart idea to plant more trees. You know, there's utility conflicts, there's conflicts with clear zone requirements on certain roadways. So you have to be very intentional if having more street trees is an objective.
Sometimes you use divided medians
impair visibility when driving. So yeah, just like we're adding more trees. Okay.
Yeah, if it's not maintained, yeah, so some of the vertical elements like that, like in medians, it helps to slow people down when they're driving, because a lot of these, they are major thoroughfares that people can just tear down in their vehicle. And so if you think that you might hit a tree, then you might be more likely to slow down. But then you're right, if it's not properly maintained, then it becomes, you're trying to pull out or something around you, then it makes it a little scary. Yeah, and for sight lines, yeah. And I'm sure you've all seen it with utilities when your tree gets big and beautiful, and then Duke Energy comes down and shaves half of it off because it's in the way of the power lines. So yeah, creating a system of that to make sure that some of these things are not happening. And then it's we have a plan for maintenance as well. And so with 5, design transportation networks that support people who have mobility challenges or who don't have access to personal transportation. So 0 vehicle households, persons with disabilities, seniors. And I think to Elizabeth's point, it's sometimes difficult to project out 20, 30 years and know where those demographics will be in the community. So understanding maybe some of the neighborhoods that have naturally occurring affordable housing or ranch style homes, so that people with physical impairments, they aren't going to go into 2-3 story townhomes or something like that. So understanding, we can somewhat try to understand where some of these demographics may live in the future based off of something like that.
And while we're on that subject, I just did want to mention that today we're only sharing the transportation goal and objectives with you all, but there's several others that are part of the overall comprehensive plan, and one is specifically getting at varied and attainable housing choices. So that's where you're kind of getting that, intentional preservation of naturally occurring affordable housing and creation of more, attainable housing choices.
And Ron, I'd like to comment on that a little bit, because I sit on the Wake County Community Health Needs Assessment team that goes through every 3 years, formal process. All the hospitals are involved with it, and all the major agencies, and then community input. It's a long 3-year cycle, every 3 years. And affordable housing and homelessness, access to healthcare, and behavioral health have been top 3. And transportation and employment are always in there. So, and the mayor, all the municipalities from Wake County are all involved on the steering committee. And it layers right on top of transportation. So that's all discussed when the county's talking about that. So it all interacts together with, access to healthcare and how people want to get where they need to go, and affordable. It used to be just homelessness, and now it's affordable housing and homelessness. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that this was all integrated in a Wake County plan, which is exciting to see. So I appreciate these pieces in here from the healthcare side.
Any comments or questions on these? So for 6, prioritize public investment in bicycle, pedestrian, and transit projects in areas identified as mixed-use place types and activity centers, which provide safe routes to schools and safe access to transit and parks. So this gets a little bit into how are we prioritizing some of these projects, and making sure that they are prioritized in the more dense and active areas that are being identified through the plan. For 7, prioritize lower cost, high impact projects such as investments in traffic signal technologies and enhancements to NCDOT projects to improve the efficiency of the transportation network while leveraging limited funds. And so this really gets into optimizing the existing infrastructure that is here. So we don't have the money to just continue building roadways and bridges and expanding transit. So how do we make the most out of what we have now? And so technologies or other innovations might be part of that, better connecting with existing projects. So one of the examples of this is part of this project is the NC 55 corridor study. So we are actively speaking to NCDOT and how do we get some priority projects identified by the town integrated into their widening project. A, so they pay for it, and B, so it gets done sooner rather than later. These are the 7. Did we miss anything that jumped out to anyone? Think on it some more. You have the papers in front of you. I will collect them at the end if you take any notes on them. So understanding that now our objective is to take all this information, sort of the framework that has been developed through speaking with us and the town and the public to come up with those objectives. Now, how do we do that? And so part of what we have to do is update these plans, the street typology plan, which was thoroughfare collector street plan, the ped bike plan, and the transit plan. So how do we do that? We need to understand where some of the transit dependent communities are and where they might be in 2055. We need to understand what is proposed now and what needs to be prioritized based off of the land use plan and the place types and where we expect density and what areas want to be left alone, things like that. So we need to understand sort of what the existing, what is out there now and how that rolls up into these objectives. So over to the left, you'll see the objectives that we just went through, the 7 of them. And then these are how we are analyzing them. So we're looking at sidewalk coverage, bike network coverage, the population within a 10-minute walk to transit, and then how we progress on greenway implementation as we reach towards 2055. And then to help us measure the connectivity, we're going to look at roadway density, intersection density, and then populations within a 10-minute walk to community facilities like schools and parks and employment centers. And then to measure safety and visibility, we're going to look at the transportation-related deaths and severe injuries, so that high injury network that's been developed, vision plan, the crash density, and then also tracking new and retrofitted crosswalks to make sure they're meeting the town's new lighting standards. This kind of gets into what you were saying, Jennifer, about pedestrian scale lighting versus vehicle scale lighting, making sure that especially at crosswalks, when you're interacting with traffic, that you can see what's happening. And then with measuring that multimodal transportation system as a full comprehensive network, looking at the multimodal networks of the bike and ped greenway network, the transit network, mobility hub network, so the 1 or 2 that have been proposed already, and how we might develop a network further than those 2, and then the street tree density as well. So part of a safe and functional multimodal transportation system is shade. It gets hot here. So looking at if we're expecting people to walk, making sure that they are shaded as they go. Looking for measuring how we help mobility challenges or don't have access to personal vehicles, looking at the specialized transportation access for older adults and individuals with disabilities. And making sure that we're prioritizing the mixed use place type and activity centers. We're going to be looking at the gaps in connections for ped bike to the activity centers, to the mixed use areas, and then also to schools and parks. And then for that enhancements to NCDOT projects or optimizing the existing infrastructure that we have and integrating into future projects, coming up with strategies and working with NCDOT, and then providing a toolkit for those low cost, high impact projects along state corridors using best practices to sort of develop that toolkit for the town to use to say, okay, we have a freeway, what options are available to us? And then, or rural roads, same thing. And so with all of that information, we did our analysis and we looked at all of those coverages and demographics and things like that. And we filtered everything again through these place types. So if this might be your first time seeing this sort of blobby map with the blue, yellow, and orange. So that's really getting into, you have rural living with blue, suburban with yellow, and mixed use is the orange. So when we're looking at higher density in the orange areas, creating activity centers for these community activity centers within them. So they are destinations for people to get to, understanding how they are getting there. They either already live and or work there because they're living in the higher density housing along these corridors or in these centers, or they are walking or biking there with our new robust infrastructure for those networks, or they are taking transit. And then looking at suburban as more of the development need that we've been seeing in the last 10 years in Apex, and then rural living, letting those remain as they are and trying to preserve where we can. And then it's also filtered through the volume over capacity. So that just means congestion, basically how we think roadways are going to perform into the future. When we, the map that you see now is the current forecast into 2050 from Campo. But we are having them do a new model run in the next few weeks using these place types so that they would understand, kind of difficult to explain, but understanding some internal capture. So where we are promoting more transit, so those choice riders, we're getting more people on transit. We're getting them out of their cars and off of the roadways. Or if you are now able to live, work, and play within a walking distance of each other, now you are capturing that internally and hoping then that you'll get some of that congestion off of the roadways. So we want to see how these new place types are going to impact the forecast into 2055 and use that as our part of our analysis. It's really an overlay with the place types. So some of the findings that we have come across so far. So looking at sort of access and the multimodal functional multimodal transportation system, there are some legacy neighborhoods near downtown, and then also major along the proposed major mixed-use corridors that are lacking ped bike connections currently. So we were actually a bit surprised to see how few sidewalks there are in some of the downtown neighborhoods. They're fairly walkable, fairly slow streets, and it's a gridded network. So the idea maybe is that it's still walkable, but let's try to get more safer facilities out there for folks. Or we ran into scenarios where there were pockets within like the transit coverage area that came up, lit up, that it would be like a 30-minute walk to access transit. And we're like, but they're right there. How are you not able to access transit? It's because they have to go all the way around to then be able to access a bus stop. Mm-hmm. So either it's that there's not bus stops where they need to be, or there's not as many bus stops as there need to be, or the street density is not there. So you just need to add one connection to then get people from that neighborhood to the existing network. So we ran into scenarios like that we want to work through. And figure out where to prioritize the shifting of bus stops or additional roadways to help those pockets that we noticed. And then also that there were areas that had higher transit dependent populations that may need expanded transit services. So understanding where they are going to be, again, with that either naturally occurring affordable housing or the targeted affordable housing that we'll be having as part of the project. And making sure that transit is available there for them. And looking at the town has done a great job in planning for the bike infrastructure. We don't really have any comments on that as far as where they need to be. They're planned where they need to be, but helping prioritize where they go based off of where we expect population and needs to be in the future. And then one of the last things is that there's a you can see it. This one. Yeah. There's this area here south of US 1 that is it's pretty industrial now. There are riparian buffers and streams that make it a little difficult to develop. But that has been identified as a large area of opportunity for mixed use. There's larger swaths of land, larger areas that are owned by a single landowner, things like that, that have really highlighted it as a place to densify. And so with that, though, it's going to be a critical place to look at for ped, bike, and transit and multimodal infrastructure because it's not currently there with the current land use that it is. So we'll have a deep dive into that area specifically.
East of 55, is that where we're, south of 1 and,
Yeah.
Okay.
Along
Jesse Drive.
okay.
So
Industrial parks.
I was asking it was noted south of US 1. I was asking if that's between 55 and US 1 is kind of the pocket that we're looking at. And Shannon said
Yeah.
the Jesse Drive area,
Yeah, so this is
because that's Viridia to the west. Yeah.
Yeah. So Viridia pretty much plans for that already in place for it to be sort of this.
Is that
ideal
the
mixed
Knights
use.
Play area?
yeah, so when we get up and look at the maps, we can point it out too, but there's Knights Play, and then just east of Knights Play at 1010, there's Jesse Drive. And the plan is that Jesse Drive will extend from 1010 to 55 through Viridia. So it's in the future a major corridor. And
Take some of the stress off. Is
Yeah.
Motiva still available?
I couldn't hear you, sorry.
Is Motiva still over in the?
Motiva is along 1010, but it would not be along the Jesse Drive corridor.
Now I'm back to property.
Yeah.
Any questions or comments?
So what is that land you propose as potential for high density? What is it currently? Is it farmland or?
I would have to look back at it.
So a lot of it is residential,
Okay, it is already.
but not developed with intensity. And there's vacant parcels as well. There is existing industrial, which we've accounted for and don't anticipate redeveloping at Production Drive and Jesse Drive. I mean, it's new industrial.
Yeah.
The Commerce Center, is that what's the name of it? Oh, I can't, it used to have a different name, and so I can't remember the new name.
Yeah, I've seen it back there.
Yeah, it backs right up to Knight's Play. So if you ever go golfing, you can see it. But then also along 55, where Jesse Drive would come in, there's potential for redevelopment as well. So kind of connecting that Jesse Drive corridor to the 55, which is really the spine of the mixed use activity center that's proposed.
Yeah, this is 55 here. This is the convergence center. Yes, yeah. So in the next one, talking about connectivity, we, as of now, without the new model run, there doesn't seem to be a correlation between intersection and roadway densities and congestion. So some of the areas that have the highest and best densities and the most connectivity, they're still experiencing the most congestion. So it's something that we need to dive into a little bit more to understand why there doesn't. We did this analysis thinking, oh, it's congested because there's not enough options there. In reality, there seems to be many options, but it's still congested. So we need to understand why. And then there are several areas that have sort of mid-levels of connectivity to these community facilities like parks, schools, employment centers that do need to be improved, especially because they're now going to be proposed as activity centers. So there's going to be more density there, more amenities, more businesses, more things for people to go to. And so connecting folks to those activity centers is going to be a big deal so that they can access all of those amenities described. And then for the, excuse me, for the safety aspect of it, just using the Vision Zero action plan. The analysis that we conducted ourselves is pretty consistent with what the vision plan had already laid out. And looking at crash hotspots near and around those proposed activity centers, and the idea that with these sort of conflicts that are being introduced, so additional nodes or more concentration of pedestrians and cyclists walking around, that has the potential for it to be even less safe. So we have to make sure that we're designing roadways in a way that's conducive for all of these nodes to be interacting with one another, with slowing traffic down, safety countermeasures, making sure that, yeah, as we introduce more activity and more people in areas that are already seeing high levels of crashes, that we have to do something about that before it gets worse. Go ahead.
With these, play work centers that you're talking about, I think about some of the existing shopping centers just in our area, like Beaver Creek and the Target Shopping Center down 55. Some of the way those are designed and the traffic flow in general is just not conducive to people, I guess, not making risky decisions sometimes. When the two like chunks of the shopping center expect you to be able to cut straight across 4 lanes of active traffic coming in and out. There's so many moving parts. I think sometimes if the developer of that facility knew more about Vision Zero, cutting shrubs back, making turn lanes easier to navigate, putting in traffic signals, because some of these where it's like a 4-way stop or even just 2 sides stopping, and you've got moving traffic coming in from both sides of 55, and then whenever neighborhood backs up to it, you're going to have people that take chances, that collisions and crashes. And then if you add pedestrian and bike element to it, you've got even moving parts to keep track of when you're making turns and coming across crosswalk areas. So I just don't know when the town gets those proposals for these mixed use facilities, if the Vision Zero aspects would be worked into those to make sure that the visibility is as good as it can be.
Yeah, no, those are really great comments. And yes, that would be part of the recommendations, is that those have to be filtered. Those proposals have to be filtered through various things like the Vision Zero. So understanding if you're along a high injury network, you have to do X, Y, and Z. Or if you are within an activity center, then there are design codes that you have to meet. Like you have to front your internal streets so that you create a roadway network within that people feel safe walking and biking through. And with a lot of the developments that you are talking about, they're created for cars. And even with some of the newer ones, it's maybe more of a park once and then walk around, but even getting for people who are not driving and parking that once, how they're getting there and how they're getting there safely.
Yeah, I've just noticed that even just driving around, sometimes the GPS will say, you're gonna go down this road, make a left. It's like, they're like, no, I'm making that left. When there's 4 lanes of traffic or cutting straight across, it's even harder than making the left. Just in figuring out who to even give that feedback to. Whoever designed this clearly didn't navigate it in the heart of Christmas rush hour traffic with 8,000 people trying to all go different directions. It's fine if it's an empty day, but if it's like getting on 55 into that chaos, it's just like, no, I'll skip it. And if you want people to use the facilities you're building, you have to make it navigable for people to get through safely.
Yeah, so 2 comments on that. Right now, well, maybe I should wait till Ashley explains it a little further, but our street typology does not distinguish between areas that are intended to be more walkable, transit oriented, suburban, or rural. So we have basically kind of 2 different types of street typologies. And when I say that, I'm talking about how are we designing the roadway? What are we giving priority to? We do have a distinction for rural, but we don't have anything currently for more urban street types. So that's one of the things we're hoping to accomplish with Peak Plan. What we won't be able to accomplish, but I think we might have recommendations around, is actual changes to our uniform development ordinance, which is specifying certain requirements of development. I think that would have to be a follow-up, that we have recommendations through the peak plan, but not specific changes. I do not.
Uh, So looking at the objective and the findings for the, those mobility challenges, looking again, this is sort of now reading what I had said earlier, but looking at the, concentrated populations within, some of these neighborhoods and understanding the demographics and supporting those demographics in the future of where they're going to be. And then, without prioritizing the mixed use or the, investment in mixed use areas and activity centers. Kind of as we get out further away from downtown, the existing sidewalk bike and transit coverage, it lessens as we get further and further. And so some of those, mixed use activity centers, and I'll go back to this sort of, if you're looking at, this is downtown here. And so we have other activity centers identified along 64 or 1 or the Jesse Drive area or 55. And so understanding how are we getting people from the surrounding neighborhoods safely to these, either walking or biking, and then safely around once they get inside of them? Or is it a matter of just transit? I believe Go Apex Route 1 currently would serve this activity center, but maybe not this one. So is it strategically talking about expanding or rerouting transit in some to better serve some of these areas in the future? And then for 7, looking at improving the efficiency of the transportation network. So again, looking at how we optimize these existing infrastructure that we have now, looking at the options that we'll discuss in that toolkit and seeing which ones are owned by NCDOT and what programs the town has and what projects NCDOT has coming up, and how do we overlap those and integrate them together again, like the NC55 corridor that we're currently doing. So I know that was a lot. Any overall comments or questions before we go to the next part?
I have one random detailed question, and you can feel free to push it off to another discussion. When you're looking at connectivity, are the greenways considered part of that?
We had a discussion on that, and we are currently not considering them as, we are not in, we did not consider them in the sidewalk or bike infrastructure connections. So they're kind of their own separate thing that we want to make sure continue to progress. But we are not expecting them to act as a way to get people from point A to point B.
Like recreation rather than transportation.
Yes.
But I think the direction that we're headed, we've had discussions around rethinking that and considering at least some greenways as part of the transportation network.
It seems like an obvious opportunity to say, hey, instead of making a greenway go here, we have to go here. And connects people, but
Okay, I guess that's a great question, because I'll send it on.
Yeah, I will say it's not included in the analysis that we looked at from like an analytical standpoint, but when we looked at the network and said, if we looked at, we want to connect these neighborhoods to a major corridor by walking, so safe routes through sidewalks. Then once they get to a major corridor like US 1, then it becomes a side path or multi-use path or some way to get people to then bike into these centers because it's just too far to walk. And so we looked at and we said, okay, well, US 1 would be the obvious choice, but there's a greenway that parallels it. So is the greenway that should be the priority, or should it be the side path along US 1? So we are using it sort of after we do the analysis and say, we need a bike connection here. Now, which one is the best place for it to be? Is it a greenway or is it a side path along?
And does it vary on who maintains the side path versus who maintains the greenway? Did you make that choice?
Yeah, it does. Parks and Recreation maintains greenways. And our Public Works Department or NCDOT, well, for pedestrian facilities, our Public Works Department maintains them.
So it's still the town.
Yes, yes.
No, I was recalling, I think last year we had a presentation from somebody discussing a greenway that, was gonna be close, see if we can bring people closer to transit. I mean, there is a connection.
Yeah. And yeah, we want to make sure that we're utilizing the infrastructure that is there already and completing it when it makes sense to get it to one of those activity centers or one of the UDO recommendations might be to make sure that developers of these activity centers or mixed use areas that they are then connecting to a greenway. Or vice versa, if there's a greenway coming in first and we know that an activity center will happen later, then stub out to connect to that new development in the future. Now we're going to ask you guys to do a little work, talked enough. So one of the things that Shannon had just mentioned was looking at the street sections and how do we prioritize the different elements within it based off of the place types. So we have those urban areas. We have the more urban areas or mixed use areas in orange, the suburban, which might be residential, but also might be industrial or office parks in yellow, and then the rural living in blue, and then some of the green that you see weaving in and out or areas that are undevelopable. And so using these place types and understanding a street section like this probably doesn't make sense in a rural living area. But understanding the different elements within a street section to help us prioritize what, if we have limited space or limited funds, what should be the number one priority in this type of area. So in the mixed use area, it's transit all the way. No matter what, make sure transit is of high quality and given the most allocation and space and funding. Or is it the pedestrian zone, whatever it might be. And so we have this exercise to look at the different elements of a typical street. So that building integration. So looking at how does the building front onto the sidewalk and onto the street. Is it maybe in a mixed use area? You have this like little portico, but you have outdoor dining or kiosks or a parklet or something like that out fronting the sidewalk in the street, or even in a rural area, making sure maybe we want consistent setbacks from the road, or we want consistently a split rail fence along any major corridor or something like that. There's a character to it. You want a type of tree buffer within rural living areas. And then the pedestrian facility, so sidewalk, multi-use path, things like that. And then the buffer or amenity zone. So if you're looking at maybe a more urban street, that's where you would find a street tree in a grate or in a planting verge. Or so really, how are we buffering or separating the pedestrian from the roadway? And then looking at bike facilities, so is it a dedicated path or a dedicated bike lane? Is it separated? Is it a share of? So it's shared with a travel way or transit lane. And then the travel way itself. So maybe in a suburban area, and when we're talking about suburban, we're not talking about like in the neighborhood itself. So those will kind of happen with the developer. But then once they get out onto like a major arterial, how do we want the street to look and feel and interact, and what are the priorities there? So maybe in a suburban area, we're just talking about, let's just get cars through here. And that's where travel way is way more important. Actually, if you go there. So for those higher density mixed use areas, it might actually make more sense for you all to go back to your place type snap on your screen. So you can know what we're referencing when we're talking about this. And so we'll start with the more urban, so the mixed use areas. How high of a priority do you think it is, either low, medium, or high, to really concentrate on that building or land use integration? Is there another place you guys want to start?
You said we should go back to the place types on our.
Yes, so this map here, to understand, so we're talking about the first one is in sort of these areas, so downtown along NC 55, that Jesse Drive area, Viridia, and then some pockets like Beaver Creek Commons area and Sweetwater.
Can you explain building integration one more time? I'm
Yes.
just having trouble reading it because I guess I don't know what was.
Yeah, so how we're integrating with the building and the land use. So if you have certain setbacks that you want to have or certain character, or you want to make sure that whatever land use is there is really responding to the street or vice versa. So I would say like building integration is usually very important in these areas. So if you have, it's usually very important in these areas. So you want to make sure that you have businesses that are interacting with the street. So you want to have active ground floor.
Yes.
You don't want to have a parking lot or a parking deck fronting onto the street. So really just making sure that there is high consideration with what is happening on the other side of the site.
So basically, the project is going on Salem Street.
Right.
Sounds good. So is the thought for this exercise for us to have discussion internally and then like vote as a collective, or to each individually by a show of hands say who thinks low, who thinks mid, who thinks high priority?
We can just vote by name if you want to, but I'd rather you guys talk about it a little bit. Either, I mean, well, listen to you, but we can talk together.
And I think of this particular one, building integration, I agree is what's going on with Salem Street, but Sweetwater, right? Mixed use, prime example. From places I've lived in the past, I would say building integration is really high priority, because if you have a place where you have a bunch of lobbies that hit the sidewalk as opposed to retail or something that's the way we put it, and interact with the public. That's a live street versus a dead street. So to me, that's very high building integration. I didn't know that was the term.
I agree.
So you think Sweetwater is high building integration?
I don't know, because I don't spend enough time there, but it's a mixed use. I was
It
using it
is.
as an example of
Okay.
mixed use.
And it has a lot of outdoor seating as well, as they're walking around.
It does, but to get from one side to the other. it's not-
Yeah, that's
not
not.
easy to-
True. But I think that like not all mixed use, high density areas are going to look like Sweetwater. Some might look like Sweetwater, some might look like downtown. But overall, in terms of connecting the customer, the pedestrian to the building, I agree. I think that's a high priority.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect.
And just one comment on that. We don't have to just base this on what we have now. We can base it on what we envision for the future. You know, what we would recommend that we strive for in the future. So if Sweetwater is not a perfect example and we think we can do better at building integration, that's okay.
Like Vinton may be a good example.
Yeah, I was just using
A
an
visual.
example. Like,
Yeah.
now I've lived in a town, part of the reason I live in Apex, because it reminded me of the town I used to live in Georgia, and they started to develop, and they put in, I guess, an ordinance that, because there were developers taking over buildings and turning them into condos, and they made a rule that you had to have retail on the bottom level because they were afraid it would become a desert. Because people just coming and going in their parking lots, right? Yeah, and it made a huge difference, and it's thriving.
And that's what was done in downtown Apex also, the downtown business association at the time came and recommended that going forward, we only have retail, restaurant, or active uses on the ground floor to keep it active.
Sounds good. Would it be easier for you all to think in homes or roads? So now that we're on building integration, think of it in suburban or rural, or go down the mixed use. Where's your brain more at right now?
Rows.
Roads.
Just sticking with the concept of building integration.
Okay.
But I don't want to speak.
It works for me.
Yeah. Okay.
Wherever you want to go, Sarah.
So then for suburban, so when we're thinking about some of the major arterials, so if you live in maybe one of the suburban neighborhoods and then you exit out of your neighborhood onto a main road, how much consideration do you want to be put into the homes and the businesses off of those main corridors?
I mean, a lower priority, whether it's low or medium, is subjective, I think.
Can you give me an example of what those things would look like if we're saying low priority versus a medium priority? I'm trying to get a real visual, so I'm just trying to get in my head what we're saying if we say
I think it is more of either space allocation. So if you have one of these roadways and you have limited amount of space that you can put something in, would you rather a concentration be put on how the buildings interact with it? Or so maybe with some of these, maybe prohibit, I'm not saying you do this, but you prohibit widening projects because you want to keep a certain setback from a property. So now you would have suburban context. It is hard on that one.
I think that's fair, because like, if you look at the widening of Apex Peakway, or, you know, a thoroughfare like Richardson Road, both be in suburban area, I think by widening those connectors, I haven't seen plans for the Jesse Drive and 1010, but if roads are being widened in certain areas, then I would tend to think that building integration would be less of a priority.
Yeah, because then if you look down and you guys say that, well, on these roads, travelway is the most important, like that's gonna always be the highest priority. So then if you only have X amount of space and then you said that building integration was low, then not much pushback is going to be put on widening.
I can also capture, like, if prioritization when it comes to building integration isn't straightforward, I
The
can,
hardest one.
yeah, I can also capture notes of just in a suburban area, what is the priority for the, you know, do we want setbacks? Do we want buffers? Do we want, you know, houses closer to the streets? Is it, you know, just what's the kind of,
when you say in a suburban area though, you're saying outside of the development. On as you exit you're using the example, as you exit the development onto a more main thoroughfare. Is that what we're talking about? Not in the neighborhood itself.
We're not codifying those local neighborhoods.
That's all we do.
Because when I think of like a suburban entity, like, just like even Parent Library, for example, that was built kind of buffered against a couple of existing neighborhoods that have been there for a very long time. But it also brings you right off Highway 64. And I think that the setback of that, where it's got its own parking area, makes it very easily accessible for people in both the neighborhoods and the community, and then people coming on 64 traveling from Cary to get to it. But that area is also fairly static, that it does not have a lot of other room for growth and development because of what's around it and what's already established. So when I think about some of these other developments coming in, I don't know if the building integration is as high a priority because some of it's up to the developer, like planting the neighborhoods and then seeing what other businesses get zoned around them.
and that would be an okay comment, I think, that, you know, it's not something that has to be specified in a street section. leave it up to the form of the development in the suburban areas. And maybe that's where, specifying the integration of buildings with the street is not as high of a priority in a suburban area.
I think I'm just having trouble latching on to.
Maybe we move past this one.
It's harder than I originally thought.
And then I think also it might be helpful to look at them and just speak instead. And so in mixed use areas, how important, I think it's easier to kind of go in this direction and say, in a mixed use area, what do I want to allocate my space, funding, and time to? And is it going to be building integration? Yes. Is it also pedestrian facilities?
I would say yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and then skipping down to the bottom, travelway would be no.
Yes, in my mind, the beauty, the mixed use that you get there, you get out the car.
Yeah.
And you do what you want to do.
Travel away for me is medium though, because I'm thinking about some of the mixed use facilities we have currently. And while I want pedestrians, that's a pretty high priority. I also want travel way to be well thought out so that the traffic flows and that the people in their cars do know the work pedestrians. And the crosswalks are well done and that they don't exist. You could put in all of the sidewalks that you want, crosswalks, if your travel way is not good, you're gonna have people not looking for pedestrians and it's gonna cause more congestion of the paths.
No, that's fair. I guess to your point, the question is existing versus future mixed use areas where infrastructure or roadways are already in place versus starting from net new.
Yeah, and I guess when I think about 30 years down the road, some of the existing structures may still be there, maybe upgraded if they still exist, and just figuring out what that looks like. If we're talking like a Sweetwater stuff around, it needs to be rebuilt. Are they totally redoing layouts? Are they just repaving the road?
No, that's fair.
But I think Jennifer, what I'm hearing you say is you want the travelway to be well designed.
Yeah. And I go by the designers always think about that. Like I think about Crossroads as an example in Cary. That seems to be one of the most horribly designed shopping centers for navigating both by car or by pedestrian, because I don't think it's very walking friendly.
No, it
If you're on-
seems designed for a car.
Yeah, if you're on one side, you can't easily get to the other side of that shopping center
Right.
without playing Frogger across several of those crosswalks.
Yes.
And the visibility is ridiculous. I mean, even walking or driving.
But in terms of allocating limited space.
Yeah.
Like, it would be,
Not that it's not important, but space.
Right.
Okay.
yeah, so if we're trying to are we doing more lanes? Are we doing wide lanes? In terms of space in a mixed use area where you have pedestrians, you want the roadway to be well designed, well planned, connected, thought out, but probably more narrow, right? Because that would slow down
Yeah,
traffic.
that's one of the traffic calming things you talked about. Yeah, so the pedestrian definitely has a higher importance for me.
So actually, is the takeaway is the guidance that you're looking for that this is a space allocation when it comes to travelway?
Yes.
Okay.
So more of the hierarchy, yes, of space. And though this is where it gets confusing, I would just maybe just stop at space, because then when we start talking about like funding, to Jennifer's point, like it has to be well designed and thought out, which takes money and time and effort.
And engineers that care.
Yeah.
Can pay attention.
Yeah, but I think if you want us to get through this, you need to give us
Parameter.
something we can work with. If you bring in more variables we can't control.
Yeah. So let's look at it space only. So if we had a sort of hierarchy of what we want to consider in
So space. Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah.
We're talking about space.
Yeah.
So low priority.
For space.
Yeah.
We also can't have everything be a high priority, medium priority. We don't have unlimited funds.
Right.
Space is,
Unlimited space, yeah.
what's that?
And unlimited space.
And not unlimited.
Worst monopoly game ever.
Yeah. Once we get through this, maybe we can move.
But also real quick, I was gonna say, that's a good point, like Crossroads was developed 35 years ago, so we're kind of projecting 30 years from now. So it's kind of hard to wrap our brains around it, because back then there was no live, work, play. So at the time, it was the largest development of its kind between Atlanta and DC, and it served its purpose. But now, as demographics have changed, designs have changed, places have changed, it's now outdated.
Yeah, and I think about like the Sweetwater, they could end up doing 30 years from now, some kind of pedestrian footbridge thing that completely goes over your road. So if you want to get from one side to the other, you want to use the traditional process.
Yeah, I would argue,
Sure.
I
We
don't,
had that in Raleigh, Arkansas.
I don't know anything about how Sweetwater was designed, but I would say there's travel way with the median.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's a lot more.
It's a
roads
wide
on
road,
roads in there. Yeah. And getting across that road, on foot, you're taking a risk. Yeah. Okay, sorry.
Buffer amenity zone,
Not in the urban areas.
Say more about that. What's in, I see it's around the bus stop.
Yeah, so it's that zone in between the sidewalk and the curb, essentially where we start to have the travel way when there's cars. And so, in urban areas, when there's not very much space, sometimes those are much smaller and, you either only have a tree or a light post or something like that, and you're pretty close walking along the corridor, along the travel way. In others, they're very wide, so that you get sort of consistent elements along the corridor. So you have those consistent street trees, consistent lighting, benches, things like that.
And for this discussion, we're talking specifically about between the roadway and the pedestrian facility.
It's in mixed use, not general urban, mixed use.
And could those be combined in one thing? That maybe it doesn't take up as much space?
Could what be combined?
The
The
pedestrian.
pedestrian facilities and the buffer and activity zone or amenity zone.
I think they're trying to think of it as a clear path for your pedestrians, and then like, the bus shelter would be like its own little bit of the sidewalk. And that way, it is pretty length of travel.
To me, it would be a medium. It's not as high priority as pedestrian building operation. But
that's something.
you need to have something,
Right.
right? You're gonna have a lot of people walking around, so you wanna have.
There, a bench or something, if you're.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree with you.
Sounds good. And then for bike facilities, this is specifically thinking about dedicated bike facilities. So having a lane that is dedicated to biking within your mixed use areas.
And then also places to park bikes, presumably.
Yes, that would most likely go in your buffer zone.
As opposed to chaining a tree.
The old fashioned way.
We actually have requirements for bike parking specifically, so I don't think we have to specify that it's in the right of way.
Okay.
In terms of space out.
Okay.
so more about a bike lane.
Yeah, I can think the bike lane would be at least medium.
Medium.
If we want people to use multimodal transit mindset.
I'm a vote for bikes as the highest priority all the way across in all three scenarios. I think that's our area of likely growth over 30 years. And by that, I mean broadly, whatever the next version of an e-bike is, scooters.
I
Do
agree.
you bikes count as bikes, or they, because they're motorized, they use the driveway?
You should probably shouldn't be on the sidewalk.
I'm sorry.
Should probably not on the sidewalk.
Not on the sidewalk.
We're talking about dedicated bike facilities, so. You know, if the group kind of sees e-bikes as an area of growth, then having those dedicated facilities.
I still don't think it's as important as pedestrian.
But it's, it's we're focusing on multi-use, I think. Suburban, some of our suburban neighborhoods, I think, are very much out.
moving everybody to walk to. Well, but I'm not talking about suburban, I'm just focused on mixed use right now.
Yeah, I just think.
Yeah,
So Jennifer, are you suggesting that it might be high for roads that provide connection to mixed use areas? Like
Yeah.
that access to mixed use areas, but then internal, maybe pedestrian is the highest priority.
Right, because if you're not in a high density mixed use area, you're gonna want some connectivity. So from that aspect, I agree, being a suburban or rural would be more important.
have a safer place to
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just think like that.
access.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would be these two. And I will also say for mixed use or more urban areas, oftentimes the travel way is going to be shared with bikes. So that's where you were gonna have, 15 to 25 mile per hour zones. And the idea is people will feel safe operating within.
Because it's a narrow travel way, the lower speed.
But as a mom of two young kids, I wouldn't do that. So also to.
And I think about like the bike lanes they've added even just on Hunter Street towards Davy Balcom, where they redrew the bike lanes. And then lanes of travel feel a little bit narrower to redirect it for the cars. I don't see a lot of people biking through that route and traversing it, but I hope that they would feel safer with as the picture shows here, a little bit more designated bike lane to get through inner city. But yeah, in some of the shopping centers and multi-use centers, I don't think that people feel safe.
Like if we said, so it's funny, you can't prioritize this way, but if we had a higher priority on travel, I'd want a higher priority on bikes, right? Because if we're gonna have a wider roadway, I want to have a dedicated bike lane. But in this scenario, we're talking the lowest priority on the travel way is their divided. If you have to make choices on space, then I would, for me, they're in the right priorities here under this excuse specifically, not general urban, but.
With the caveat that bikes are accommodated safely in some way, just maybe not in their own dedicated.
Inside the mixed use development. And, kids today, in 30 years, are gonna be wanting to use those sites still, I think. I think it's gonna be an extremely important form of transportation.
In 30 years, it's gonna be the driverless e-bike.
I mean, yeah, people know the little helicopter. I think it needs to be considered pretty important inside the mixed use zones because they're gonna be coming in from the travelway.
Do you think it's as important as pedestrian?
I think it might be in the future, and maybe it's not right now, but I think.
Well,
It
no,
might
we were
be.
talking future.
I
I
know.
don't think Elizabeth thinks so.
I got feeling that I don't ride anything right now, but I know my kids have, and all the tons of kids that are out there, they're all gonna grow up with these things, they're gonna want to use them. And, I think trying to plan for that, it's very difficult to know, but it just seems to me pretty important that it's gonna be important outside of the development, they're gonna be coming in. It's important there to be.
And that's good to note that in talking about this at micromobility, considering that in the bike facilities, that will be.
The one, I couldn't hear you.
We couldn't hear what you
I
said.
didn't hear that last phrase.
Understanding. Note that we're considering micromobility as well, in addition to bike facilities. And that as a note. Okay.
That would be 30 years from now, and people are like, what were these big tech hooligans?
Go find some time capsules.
That makes sense, too.
Everywhere. Is there any strong feelings on pedestrian facilities in suburban or rural areas? And again, understanding that it's outside of the developments for suburban.
Low for rural. Would be my thought.
I guess I'm just not quite understanding the pedestrian facilities in suburban areas, because I know we have like sidewalks. But when I walk out of like any of the developments around me, there aren't a lot of businesses there, so it's mainly just that sidewalk. And it's, I mean, it's wide enough for both for a walk, shoulder to shoulder, so. I guess I'm not following the grading of space allocation, because I know we've talked about how developers are required to include things like sidewalk.
So they are required or could be required within sort of your insulated neighborhood. And then as soon as they get outside of that neighborhood, they're no longer required, and that's either a state road or a town road.
Oh, okay.
Well, they're required along the frontage of their property only. They're not required to make connections. So that's why you get those broken segments.
Right.
So if we're just, give us some guidance here, if we were to say on suburban, and I'm imagining different suburban settings around Apex. And we said pedestrian facilities was a high priority versus a low priority. What might that mean when decisions were being made?
So going back to some of those corridors that we're identifying, that if we want folks to be able to get from their suburban neighborhoods or business centers to these activity centers, to the more urban mixed use areas, how are they getting there? Are they getting there by walking? Are they getting there by biking? Or are they getting there by driving or taking transit? And so if we prioritize that pedestrian facilities are the most important, then when that decision is made to connect with a sidewalk or a side path or expand transit, the town will have a better understanding of what.
So when we think about Apex, tell me when it becomes suburban. If we start from down, at what point does it become suburban?
Probably things all located.
Yeah. Well, I don't care about Raleigh thing.
Like even here at town hall, I live in Shepherd's Vineyard.
Yeah.
And to me, that is suburban.
Well, that I'm asking these
Yeah.
guys
Yeah.
so that we know how we're answering.
Because I think it was on, I think it was marked on the map.
All the green is.
Yeah, the yellow color of the suburban.
It's funny, I see it green, you see it yellow.
Sorry. It looks like
It might be color.
I might have had a,
So most of Apex is.
yeah, this.
Okay. All right, that helps. If we want people to walk to transit, then we've got to have a good place for them. So you say. Yeah, and we've talked before about, we have these gaps in sidewalks and stuff, and you can't get from place safety. Yeah, we have to do schools. If we want people to get out of their cars, we got to design for it. So for me, that's a high.
I guess to ask a specific question, in suburban areas, are sidewalks sufficient
As opposed to what?
as opposed to like a wide side path?
Like a 10-foot side path. Yeah, I think sidewalks are.
That's what I was.
Generally.
thinking. Generally, like sidewalks would be sufficient.
But sidewalks on both sides.
On
of the
both
road,
sides.
Yeah. You know, good crosswalks, good
That's-
safe crosswalks.
That's the big challenge here, is you have
Yeah.
sidewalks only on one side.
Mhm.
I think the weather is gonna get more extreme over
Yeah.
the years, so for me, sidewalk, there has to be periodic benches and some shade trees, tree canopy. I think it means something else. I think it also means that you plow the sidewalk when you have ice storms. I think all of the weather issues are gonna get worse and worse, so I'm a big believer that there's a lot of amenities that go with making something walkable.
And I know we talked about public works maintaining greenways and side paths. Do they treat when it like is in snow to make sure sidewalks are passable?
They cannot treat all sidewalks.
Oh, I know, it's a huge ask.
So it's usually, because Elizabeth raised this question about some areas, if there's known problem areas, if there's reported issues, they'll try to get to those.
And then they have a lot of responsibilities when we have that weather.
Yeah, and they can't plow sidewalks, so,
Oh, but people do. I mean, in other parts of town, plowing sidewalks is a thing that happens during the winter. If you're like me, if you think that ice storms and extreme winter events are gonna get worse, then you want pedestrian to be a legitimate way to be mobile, to do the logistics of your life without a car, then you need to think about that 10 years from now.
Or when they tell you to stay off the road. And walk. But now I skate the line.
But I don't want to miss, Elizabeth, what you were saying about amenities in suburban areas. So we're,
Amenities in all of them I walked here and, you know, I was dripping with sweat and had to squirt the water and hope someone would give me a ride. It was just that in extreme heat, it's miserable to be a pedestrian. So I think if you want people to really count on walking as a primary mode of transportation, that you can do it without a car, then it's pedestrian plus amenities as the weather gets more extreme.
so, I know this is getting, sorry, away from the priority, but I need more details. So, benches, you mentioned benches and shade. Would that be specific to routes that like along residential streets or along like the routes that take you to places you need to go, like to activity centers, to bus stops, to.
For me, more than anything, it's grocery store that someone can walk from wherever they live to get groceries.
And like also at activity centers.
Just to, Jennifer had also mentioned previously, lighting, so pedestrians getting lighting as part of that. Very safety.
My promise not to plan my whole yet, but the thoughts cross my mind, is it'll be darker spots in town where the street lights, I mean, exist, but don't do much for the pedestrian aspect.
So understanding that sort of the amenities, is a package deal with pedestrian facilities, is it as important? Slightly less important? Go ahead and put that on there as a high. Or medium.
Medium. I think the pedestrian piece, I think is the most important to me, but I think the amenities, I would say are medium, because when they're not there, it's very noticeable. If you do kind of long walk to get from 20 to 20, whether it's a grocery store or another community facility, that having that is a nice feature, but I don't know that it's a deal breaker for somebody walking, that it could be depending on their mobility.
And then for the last one, we can stick to suburban, let's just skip building integration for now, the travel way along these arterials.
Say at least medium.
I was thinking medium.
And I guess some of the travel way, even in suburban areas, still maybe DOT control space, or is it town control space? There was this.
It's a mix, it's really a mix of DOT roads and town roads in suburban areas, depends on the classification of the roadway. So your residential streets would be town maintained. But more of your highways for sure, and your thoroughfares would typically be more NCDOT.
And then looking at rural, so going back to the map, extending even further out into the western and southern parts of the planning area. Again, with those, some of these are the same roadways, it's just extending them even further. Does the character or allocation or priority of them change?
Well, the travel way, I would expect. Higher priority.
And I think just the density.
Same, design standard. Aren't there design standards that, you know, the road is pretty much a road, you know, it's gotta be 11-foot wide lanes and 12-foot wide lanes. So I mean, if we're talking space, there's not a huge difference. Travel way.
Between what and what?
Well, there's state road standards.
But
For-
if it's in a suburban area, you can have a 2-lane road with a turn lane or not, right? Whereas in a rural setting, can't you have like more lanes or something? I don't know anything about the rules. So.
Yeah, and even your lane widths do differ. So you can have much more narrow lanes, for example, in a place where you want people to drive more slowly than in a place where your main goal is to keep people moving.
Is that kind of some of the traffic calming kind of things that they can adjust language?
You kind of try to imagine like traveling on sort of an imaginary road. And as you are going, maybe it has multiple lanes, the speeds are a little bit faster, the buildings are, you can't see them, they're behind tree buffers, they're really far back. And then as you are going, the speed limit struck, it goes down to 2 lanes, maybe 3 with a dedicated turn lane. Now the buildings are starting to get closer to the street. You're now starting to see more amenities and a sidewalk or a side path. And then as you continue to go, the buildings get taller, they get closer, your lanes get more narrow, you start to see buses now and more ped bike facilities, things like that. So like all of that can happen on the same road. It's just kind of the context around it will influence what that road is doing and how it integrates together and how you interact with it.
With the way this is listed, I would think that this would read to me that under rural, we're expecting we need the most travel lanes. Which I don't know if that's the place where it's the high priority necessarily.
That's kind of what I meant.
Yeah.
I think that's.
Okay.
Yeah, you might just be interpreting.
Because to me, it's trying to get there, right? You're trying to get to wherever in that workspace is your destination.
They've got to come in from further out,
Yeah.
maybe different modes of transportation.
And with the bike, high priority, as Elizabeth suggested, that potentially creates lifeline there that they're traveling in a safer way than.
And that might be some of the locations where if the roadway or the travelway is more important and there's more lanes, well, now you have less space to accommodate bicyclists. So now they kind of go behind everything in front of ways now. So still accommodating them because they're high priority, but where they're being accommodated.
Just looking at the map, I don't know with our current transit plan, the bus goes out that far to even accommodate those residents moving out there. So that biking may be one of the only options available if they don't have cars.
And are we thinking accommodating with those sidewalks that we're imagining extending out to the rural areas?
Maybe.
I don't think so.
I think so. I mean, thinking about the communities that and the cities that are out there. I don't know if they'd even.
From a funding perspective, I wouldn't think so.
So not from a prioritization of local projects, local funding to build new sidewalk. One question that's come up, just to get some specific feedback, is should we require sidewalk on both sides of residential streets in rural areas? Or
Like within a development.
or is one side sufficient, or honestly?
Both sides is helpful. I think it encourages more people to get out and use that sidewalk. And I think when it's only on one side, not like the barrier, but I think people just choose different alternatives and using their feet.
Well, the thing is, none of this is gonna get less inhabited.
Yeah.
It's only gonna have more and more people, so.
Yeah.
The more sidewalks you have, I think better.
I think it also encourages kind of.
So both sides, I would say both sides if we have that option.
But then would that mean that, because if we're saying,
No, this is not related to this. She's saying inside the development.
Yeah, I'm saying in
specific to
residential, in rural residential areas, is it important to have sidewalks on both sides of the
So
street?
maybe you're thinking in the network.
as I say, if they're in rural areas, is there a high priority need to have it on both sides? That's a question that's.
I think so, just for safety in general, pedestrian safety, because even in a large development that's set out of rural parts of the community, I still want to be able to walk the dog safely, take kids on bikes, strollers, whatever. And when there's no sidewalk, sometimes the edge of people's yards is not a safe spot to walk. The visibility is different, there could be a ditch, whatever the situation is. But I think having those sidewalks on both sides makes the community more interactive. As you walk, you pass some neighbors, like just, it connects that neighborhood. But we're talking inside the development, not in our priority making. Because that's my understanding.
So I'm asking for something more specific than the matrix. Just because this is a question that's come up and we do have standards for residential streets.
I think the volume matters.
Because I was gonna say, if you go back to the table, if we said like yes to pedestrian as a high priority, then would there be sidewalks on both sides of every street in town?
No, but that's not the question she's asking.
She's asking separate.
She's asking something separate.
Yeah.
But I think I've gotten your feedback on it sufficiently. So, and I know we've got more.
For me, it's very much about the income level, because I know there's some rural areas where it's just full of massive, $4 million homes on really, really big lots. And it's still rural, right? A rural development. And then there's the old, the little branch homes that have been there a long time, where it's seniors and they're low income. So for me, if it's people who might need to safely walk somewhere for their survival and they can't afford other options, they deserve sidewalks. The best sidewalks we can afford to give them. And then if it's these sort of luxury home communities and it's just walking a dog, it to me is like a completely different thing. Give them a sidewalk on one side of the road that the developer pays for.
But Elizabeth, I can interject. I think what she's talking about, the developer would pay for.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, it would be what do we require with development?
It's probably more those $1 million homes you're talking about, but she's saying the we wouldn't require the developer to put in sidewalks, just thinking about the future.
And for me, see that situation where they're not, the people living there are not going to be walking for survival. They're not walk to get for
No, but what we're talking about here is once they get out of that, so regardless of whether they have sidewalk on one side or the other, right? Or both. Once they get out, how high a priority is it to have where are we on the pedestrian facilities in a rural setting?
Jenny, when we say rural, it's like 1 unit per 5 acres.
Just rural.
Okay, not like a land use plan.
Whatever this color is, yellow, green, whatever. Yeah.
It kind of depends on how busy the road is.
We need to stay on the matrix, yeah. I'll never get.
Well, and I went ahead since that it's a package deal, put this as a priority if the pedestrian facility is low. So I think this is good for us to work off of. We do have another exercise, but if it's okay with Shannon, we're gonna skip it so we can talk. Would you rather do the bike facility?
No, I think we can preview this as just something that we're going to be grappling with. If you want to provide feedback, when we get to this exercise, we can. Also, the third public forum, we really want this group to attend. That's another opportunity for you to provide feedback. But we're going to be looking closely at the different types of bike facilities and where we recommend them. And there's a lot of variety. This is one of the most difficult transportation problems. I think there's different types of riders. So just, I guess, a preview, if you could please help us at Public Forum 3, share your input when we bring it back. No, it'll be fall. I think fall. This will be something we want you to provide comments on.
Maybe you can email us once you have the date, so we won't meet as a group.
I will email
Just
you.
the sooner we can get it.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we did just have open discussion for us to gather around this table and look at the maps, and if you all have big experience or learned from others of updates or issues that we need to make to this map, or the thoroughfare collector street plan, the bike ped plan, and the transit plan. that is something that we need to do, but also I know you guys have other stuff on your agenda.
We can spend some time on it, but we don't have, we try to get out at 6:45, but, we need to get through this business, so.
We have the plans here, if you guys don't mind coming over here. And this is really just like a brain dump, if you probably have thought that you have needed to get out or didn't know who to talk to about them, or have experienced something where this bus stop's always flooded, I can't even access it, that's good to know.
All right, can you focus us?
Yeah, so there's the transit plan, and then like head function to understand issues that will repair the most about.
And just keep in mind, these are like long range plans, so not necessarily we need a trash can at this bus stop. Or like, you know, this is like overall facilities. Comments on those, so maybe one map at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah, focus, let's focus.
And this group's most familiar with transit, so I'd say let's start with that.
And so, like some of the activity centers that you saw, you know, it's here at the Beaver Creek Commons area. It's sort of over here where Sweetwater is. Here.
Is our transit system good?
Yes.
No,
Currently, no.
Didn't go to the library.
correct. So yeah, so what you're looking at, is these different colored lines are the regional and then local existing and planned bus service.
So what input do you want?
If you've experienced challenges in the transit system that you think need to be addressed in the future plan.
Just because the lines are a little hard to see. With the existing system, what are some of the more significant proposed changes to this existing setup?
Say some of the bigger stuff that is proposed is the addition of routes. So the Go Apex Route 2.
The dotted.
Where
you see the dotted
lines does not.
Where would be the new Friendship Library? It's down here?
Yeah.
Is there any desire to connect to that library as well?
I think we'd like to connect to the closer in one.
Yeah, even here it would be great to have it stop, because that gives you internet service and other like town resources.
But think about it,
Yeah.
this is our 2050.
That's what I was saying, like, you think of closer, when you think of closer in, like.
So just library connection.
Well, but so that's why I'm asking for focus. You're asking for problems we've had. You're talking about 2055. So are we talking now or future?
I want to know more about the future. So
Okay.
we just did the Apex Transit Prioritization
Yeah.
Study to identify the routes that are here now. So what do we need to be thinking about? Bigger
So route
picture,
2 is
2055.
having more routes. I would hope by 2055, we have just more buses in general, like full-size city buses. But ridership aside, I want it to look like a real transit system, and I've lived in Austin, and the transit system is amazing. So I want actual buses and more than one bus making the same circuit.
And going opposite.
Yeah,
direction.
yes, goes
So
on
you-
the route, yeah, yes. Northbound, southbound.
I mean,
whatever.
vision for me is you can live out here, wherever the area is that we're gonna focus on. You can, instead of having to drive and you say, oh, I want to go downtown and eat dinner.
Yes,
I can go there.
I can grab the bus.
I can grab the bus and then I can go over to the movie theater if it is still there. And, you know, that sort of, to make it easy to pick up a bus and go without
Just
it taking 2 hours. Because you have, you know, the situation we have now. So something more circular with,
better timing.
maybe a hub and spoke sort of thing or something, but I'm not a transportation person. I just know what would work for me.
Where is the mobility hub gonna be? That's somewhere off downtown Salem?
Yeah, right there.
And is that bus and train?
That's the vision.
Okay. If so,
If
2035
exists, yeah.
So, okay, what you're saying about being able to pick up a bus anywhere and have convenient access to where you'd like to go,
more coverage and stuff.
is that everywhere in the planning area, or should we concentrate that type of service?
Well, it would seem to make sense to focus around those more densely populated areas. I mean, if you can, money is no object, yeah, let's make it all Apex.
But it isn't.
Right, but it isn't. Well, so go where the people are more densely concentrated.
And depending on how big the town is in 2055, like from a system I'm used to experiencing, they have park and ride lines. So you would park in the rural areas, park your car, and then catch a bus into a subway or a bus into a train. So if we just have a bus system in 2055, some kind of park and ride aspect to get you into downtown, to make it so you don't have to necessarily drive the entire way.
Right, so to what Jennifer was saying, like a connector area, because I don't think there's any transit connectivity in this southwestern part of Apex. For a lot of the future current road.
Yeah. If that's where we're expanding to, we need to make sure they're included in the options for transit. Even if it looks at like park and ride to get them into the system somehow.
Okay, let's hope that didn't actually read that part tonight.
Yes.
I can't read upside down.
Don't worry.
Yeah, I like that idea, because, I mean, I know not everything's gonna happen. I tend to focus here because I live here, but if you've got these activity centers, you
Yeah.
want people to be able to get to them.
Relatively easy.
So without having to get in the car.
But some of those rural communities, you're not gonna get. I don't think you're gonna get the same bus stop
No,
coverage you're gonna get
No,
in
that
the
makes
center of
sense.
town.
So, okay, yeah. Want your input, Sue. So one thing that I am wondering about is the 64 corridor when it comes to transit, because we have these proposed more mixed use areas. So almost like, intensifying Beaver Creek, intensifying the Costco complex. And
Is the, I'm sorry, is the DOT plan that was in the works 2-3 years ago, that's now been pushed, I believe, to 2028, where they're taking out all the traffic signals between US 1 and like Lower Duncan and putting in concrete walls still on the books?
so DOT is moving forward with an interchange. So basically ramp
Where you get off
Moving
on the
it
right hand
at-
side,
yeah.
and a flyover road or whatever they
at
call it.
Laura Duncan and at,
So that's the
Lake
first
Factory.
implementation. Okay.
yeah. So 64 will be a highway.
They're gonna make it it's sounding like super highway, but the last meetings I attended with DOT with the concrete walls and no traffic signals to slow people down. Like they're trying to make it more of an
Yes.
express connector.
Yeah, so I mean, for now, you'll still have the, super street at Jenks,
Yeah.
Richardson. But we're showing all these mixed use areas
Yeah.
along that corridor, but it's very much a car centric corridor.
Yes.
So in terms of transit, we don't have any plans.
Yeah, and it won't be bike safe if they go forward with some of the changes, I wouldn't think.
Unless you have a bridge that goes over.
Well, you will for the cross streets, like where Lake Pine is and where Duncan is, from what I saw on their.
But
map.
she's talking about these potential breach of mixed use.
Oh,
Yeah.
are you talking about this part of 64
To
The
get,
brown spots, yeah.
okay,
or over here by
all
the
of it.
library?
Really just.
yeah. And so they are doing flyover streets for some of it, get off on an exit ramp and have to go to a light, make a left or right to get to the things on either side. Costco, Sweetwater, I'm guessing will end up in that at some point, but they've got lights there already, so I don't know what their plan is for that. But it definitely doesn't feel pedestrian or transit was a part of their considerations in that decision making.
Because we don't have to have the answer
Yeah.
today, but to me, that's not.
It is extremely challenging to the point of almost. To provide transit along the corridor like 64.
I still wanted above ground light rail, but DOT told me no. They told me it wasn't feasible. And I said, we've got median the whole way down from almost the Chatham County line to Garner. There's grass pretty much between that. You do have to get over the belt line on certain chunks of it, but I said, why can't we do an above ground light rail? we don't have the snow that Chicago has. I'm like, can we look at the study again? The engineer didn't like my question, but I think there are other transit options because the train option with the mobility hub that's going in, what was presented at least a couple of years ago was you had to catch a train in Apex to ride into downtown Cary, to then catch a connector to get into Raleigh. No one is going to do that if it takes you 45 minutes to get where you can get by 20 minutes back. They're just not. I mean, even if you have to sit in traffic on the Beltline to get there, 30 years from now, I don't see the traffic being any better because they keep repaving the existing infrastructure. I know that
So,
makes sense.
Can you repeat your question here? I think I'm lost from what you're trying to get us to think about with the 64 corridor.
Well, I think right now it's, do others agree that's a problem? Like, is this, a problem that we need to think about?
Well, it's just
figure
gonna,
out?
it's gonna be more dense if we follow that, and it's gonna dump a lot more cars on 64, right? So, it seems like you want a way to at least connect, like if I'm living out at the Imagine New Cool Beaver Creek place with the then senior housing center that I'm living in. And I love it. I want to get downtown Raleigh. Am I, 75, gonna have to get in the car?
You can catch the 305, but you still have to get yourself to the bus stop.
But I'm just saying, if it doesn't serve, so yeah, I think it's a problem.
A lot of cities cut in half interstates. So
Yeah.
this is gonna kind of lop off a little top half of Apex.
So it's almost making sure it's making sure we've got good connections across 64
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
keep Apex.
Is that, I'll just call it the orange blob, the westernmost orange blob?
Yeah.
That's Sweetwater.
That's Sweetwater, yeah.
That's Sweetwater? Okay.
Beaver Creek.
That's Beaver, okay.
Yeah, you're a little further
too
west.
further, yeah, okay.
If I think 30 years into the future, I would want every single bus stop to have weather protection, at least a shelter up top. I feel like we could do that in 30 years, assuming that the weather's going to get more extreme.
Yeah,
I think we should borrow what Terry's doing, where paratransit door to door. Its age is an eligibility factor. Currently, it's anyone over age 60. I know that's expensive. I would settle for anyone over age 70.
we have that through Wake County.
No, we can't.
No, we don't. Oh, okay.
You have to be a medicated recipient of dialysis or live in a rural area.
In our fair transit, it's federally required, so disability, not age-based.
You've got to prove it.
So expanding door to door to expanded eligibility to door to door.
Yes.
In 30 years from now, you're gonna have a force field.
Yeah,
You can
no,
build it out yourself.
Here, it's gonna be important. UNC.
Oh, the Children's Hospital.
Yeah.
Is that, and where is that
That's
on
gonna
the
be-
map? Is that in the normal section?
That's gonna be right here.
Okay,
The southernmost orange blob.
so that's gotta be connected to transit because you've got families that may not. be
Duke
able
has
to
their
drive.
green level.
Oh, they do, yeah, you're right,
That's-
55.
That's.
Just off the
Big
map.
plans to expand that, so, yeah.
Actually, as I said before, the mixed use areas consider to include low income housing.
No.
So they could, but it's not required. A lot of the mixed use areas have, mixed types of residential. But affordable housing is something that, more of a negotiation. And where the town, helped make that.
And what was the other one we needed to look at?
Let me just say one more thing about it is Durham's had extraordinary success doing direct shuttles that go from an area where seniors live or senior housing complex. And it's direct 1 day a week for 5 hours midday to Food Lion, to Walmart and back. That's all it does for those areas. It's incredibly popular. And I think that's an option for us rather than doing expansion with low ridership routes, like to the library. I mean, it'd be brilliant to go to the library all day long, 7 days a week, but I think it would be suitable to do that once a week or even twice a week, or I'm sorry, twice a month even, have a library shuttle where you know it's going walking distance from your house. I think that's a way to think about pockets of low income or elderly or disabled that.
Just doing a pickup at like the housing complex.
Right there, and it's door to door. Then it goes door to door to Walmart. Whereas our bus kind of is Walmart adjacent. We don't actually go to the Walmart at all. But that would be perfect. I would, if that was eligible for me, I would just plan to do all my shopping that day. And you can do 3 grocery bags per trip because they try to fill it with people. That's kind of the issue. So you can't bring massive amounts of cat litter or something to fill the little shuttle bus up. I think we should
affect the cart thing too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's a way to address the low ridership issue, right? It's making people, they're able to logistically take care of the essential things they need for life, but you
And
don't
make
have
it more
empty
attractive too.
buses.
You're not having to ride the bus through 8 or 9 stops you don't care about. When you know you can plan your errands and okay, if I get the bus at 9 o'clock, I'll be at Walmart before 10, can get back on and get home. I'm not wasting the whole day circling Apex.
And there's many problems with assuming that a more complex fixed route service is going to ever attract a more affluent population. And this is the whole thing for me, is thinking about the demographics of poverty, who rides. Because right now, the number one growth population for our bus is the homeless. We've hit critical mass, right? Most likely scenarios, I ride by myself, no one is on. And the second most likely is it's me plus 2 homeless men sleeping in the back. I think people don't kind of understand what's happening on Go Apex. And so it means something different at your transit hub. If the homeless are a significant population, then you need security guards and lighting. There's just all these issues. And the more that you have people who, riffraff is the word that the critics use on Facebook, but then people who are affluent and have a lot of cars at their fancy house, they're not going to want to ride that or want their teenage daughter riding that. I think we need to really think about.
But you know what? Yeah, I think that's important. But you also, if you design for cars, you're just going to keep getting more cars. You got to design for something else or you won't get it.
Yeah.
And it's, I can afford to have a car and have it in my house, but I would rather not get in it every time. Yeah. And some people, that's about the price of gas, but for some people, it's about not polluting. And it's just, I like the feel. I mean, if I think about 2055, I would love to be able to walk out of my house in Haddon Hall and grab the bus right at the end of the street, not halfway down, halfway to downtown, and say to my friends, hey, let's go grab a bite, and we don't need our car.
Meet for lunch somewhere and not have to drive to do it.
Yeah, I mean, and how beautiful would that be? And what a great place Apex would, even greater than it's now. If when you drove, I love the way you painted that picture for us. If you're driving down the road, that was real good. You should do that again. But I would love for people to be coming through and hit Apex. This is awesome.
Yeah.
What is this place? Where all these people are walking and they have a bike lane.
I think that's a great segue into the second map she wants us to get.
Yeah, and engineering ideas for pedestrian cycling.
I think we've addressed a lot of it with just making sure the sidewalks are connected. That to me is the biggest issue. I don't cycle, but I do like to walk places. And just knowing I can get there and not have to step into the street. When I've been walking even down 10 to meet friends, there are sections that gap. And I'm having to go, okay, are there cars behind me that are going to mow me down? Because I can't cross to the other side to walk with, against the cars like you're supposed to. Because I'm only on one side. And I can't imagine
I like the greenways and.
But are all the greenways well maintained?
Well, I was gonna say, even with biking, to me, anything to keep me street, unless it's really safe. I was looking at that one slide because there's some options that I would bike on, but some of course I wouldn't. There's a lot of people who like connection to trail. They have to go off the tobacco trail in Old Farm Park. They're so cool that you can do that.
They made
That's all through carry to get there. So opportunities for getting the transportation throughways with those connections to greenways, to sidewalks, to where it's civil or new, types of greenway, bike lanes. I think it's great for moving people who either are doing it for recreation or getting places.
So if there's any specific areas where, this should be a high priority, because as Ashley was saying, we have a lot planned, we have a lot built. So if there's any like high priority areas where you think.
Well, the 55 corridor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are there bike lanes on 55? Any spots?
No, I don't remember
No.
existing.
I don't think so.
Because I know like 751 doesn't have them either. Some of the bike clubs like to come out there and it's like, they can't ride single file because there's 25 of them.
And
But then
you
they-
call 55 this, I'm sorry,
You're good.
you call 55 the spine of the,
Yeah.
the mixed use plan. And now there are places I wouldn't want to walk much as.
Yeah. So the plan with 55 is that there would be side paths, so 10-foot wide path on at least one side for the entire length through the, or we'll say the mixed use area.
I know there's sidewalk on
So
some
that would make
portions
a
of
big
it.
difference. I think people feel safe if they could bike there.
Yeah. And you said they're making changes to like one of the bridges over 55 for that purpose?
So the DOT project that's funded is from US 1 to Olive Chapel Road. So Olive Chapel,
Is it where the,
Oh, on
where the
55,
post
yeah.
office? Yeah, because that corridor between like, I even think like downtown Salem Street to the post office is ridiculously narrow and heavily traveled. And so I don't know if that's
sorry, where?
from Salem Street to where like almost to Olive Chapel where the Walgreens is.
Okay,
That stretch to me seems really narrow and very highly traveled.
okay.
Like making a left out of the post office certain times a day is like, oh, just forget that. Like,
Yeah.
You try not on 55.
yeah, yeah,
So you're gonna replace that railroad bridge?
Yeah, they are. Well, yeah.
eventually.
Well, and the Salem, I know Salem Street, North Salem Street, running up to 64, there's lots of talk about what's gonna happen with that.
Where the
With
cartoon
new
areas, you mean?
Development is gonna go.
Yes, yeah.
But that, I live in Hen Hall somewhere there, that's gotten worse and worse and worse and worse from a
It's part of
traffic safety.
because of the
standpoint.
school.
It's because of dailies, it's because there's just a lot of traffic there, it's, but I mean, I don't know how much of it's dailies, a lot, it's dailies different times, but it's just more heavily trafficked.
Okay, so
And I know they're putting in a pedestrian crossing there, but between, it's really just that piece of Salem Street between Hunter and 64. Let's see.
Yeah, near where the car dealership is here.
Side plan on these.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Crossroads, yeah.
It's sad that my landmark.
Yeah, that's the railroad. I was looking at that. That's the railroad. Yeah, so up to 60. And that Thales is right there. And so even though they did all they did, it's traffic.
Crazy.
What kind of input are you looking? Specific about what they do? I mean, overall, something you want?
no, this is the sort of thing that we wanted to give you guys. If you had thoughts about critical areas, priorities, give you a chance to provide that. I realize it's almost 7 now.
So real quick, I was gonna say, crazy thought, if the future of 64 is to become even a larger thoroughfare than it already is, what about the increase in pedestrian or biking there as an alternative means of transportation, since there would be more traffic potentially?
There
Or is that a
won't
safety
be,
concern?
there won't be pedestrian facilities.
Is there any way to like create an alternate path? 64? No, like off to
Off to the side.
off to the
I've seen that
side,
before. in
You know,
other
almost what
areas.
you call it,
I don't know,
yeah.
I've seen it off of 66 in Fairfax, and I've seen it in other places where what you describe is like an off-road
kind of like that 10-foot side path.
Like they do wildlife paths for.
Like the deer flyover?
Yeah. So it was, pedestrian facilities were looked at as part of the 64 corridor. And really cut off when it gets into the apex area because of the frontage roads needed, the interchanges.
Well, that's where I wonder if the greenways, because like I'm seeing, and I know this one because it's in my neighborhood. So Adden Hall, could you connect over to North Beaver Creek? I mean, if you can connect those greenways.
Yeah, so an off-road parallel route 64 and provide that.
That's a great idea.
And they've talked about
It's pretty close.
with
right?
Brady Branch. With part of the 64 project, though, they did talk about like the roads at Shepherd's Vineyard Drive, creating a tunnel under 64 to connect the Harris Teeter side. So I'm wondering if you could even like in some way connect that road and then tie into some of the greenways. Because there is a greenway that runs through Shepherd's Vineyard.
Right. Yeah, they will, Shepherd's Vineyard will be extended, well, based on the current.
Yeah.
Over
Things could change.
64 now. instead of
Over, okay.
Because you've almost got it. It's an alternative path if you connected Adden Hall to North Beaver Creek Greenway. The North Street.
Is that in the plans to make that connection? For Adden Hall and Beaver Creek Greenway?
So as a it sounds like as a priority, make sure that this is continuous and complete.
I mean, if 64 is
It's awfully close, 30 years.
So if 64, just to kind of merge these together, if 64 is not going to be pedestrian or bicycle friendly, there's no connectivity out here with all the development over here, almost in the same way that there would be park and ride to connect down here, but some level of connectivity on 64 to get in here in the same way.
You gotta do something, because I mean, you can't just abandon them out there if you want them to use the system. If that's not a priority, then they can drive in, but.
Because I was just thinking, like, in terms of like connectivity, whatever that mode of transportation looks like, whether it's a bus, a train, a plane, whatever the case might be, have opportunity here for connectivity on 64, on 55, and US 1.
Are you talking about the park and ride idea?
Or just whether it's a park and ride or just an opportunity to connect, like
Mobility.
mobility hub. Yes, that's the word I was looking for.
That the transit system touches out there.
Yes, if there's a mobility hub, like to say, I would love, because in the future, I would love to get to downtown Cary or downtown Raleigh. I don't know what transportation larger is going to look like in the 30 years, but like when I lived in Fairfax, like I drove 10 minutes to get to either a bus station or a train station, and I can get to anywhere. So like if you look at the entry points west, kind of southwest and southeast, having some level of mobility hub to connect.
To connect into the system.
Yeah.
That makes sense. All right, I think we should probably wrap this up, even though it's really helpful. So I would just encourage you all to come to Public Forum 3, and you can do more of this and see the draft recommendations and react to those.
Is that specifically about transportation or no?
It will, Public Forum 3 will have the place type map.
Is it the whole 2050?
It's the whole plan. It will include the transportation.
You have a pretty big emphasis this time. Transportation. And so that's in August?
But we don't have a date yet, but it won't be August.
Not August.
I don't know.
Sometime in the fall.
But we have some things to wrap up. Should we return to our seats and?
And I have to leave it.
Well, it's understood.
Discussion, huh? All right, so doing that, thank you so much for leading this discussion. everybody's input. That's great feedback, everybody, so thank you. Just a few more agenda items. Fiscal year 2027 work plan subcommittee updates. Thanks everybody for their input, for getting on a committee and working on the subcommittees. And I think two of the committees have met. The Community Outreach Committee, the first meeting will be next Friday, so they haven't met yet. But the Infrastructure and Safety Committee, I think, met. So, is that makes infrastructure, y'all met yesterday?
Yeah, I can give an update. Yeah, we met Monday. We decided on kind of an informal committee where chair or vice chair, it's just going to be consensus based kind of discussions and decision. We initially with the work list that we created, there was 4 activities. We combined one with another one, so we only have 3 now. 3 strategic tasks we have. First is regarding street design and UDO amendments. The committee is going to review with staff the street design standard as well as the proposed bike and pedestrian UDO ordinance changes or additions to it. That I think the peak planning said would be probably in September. We have that kind of meeting, and then the UDOs would be maybe in October.
And then I think it may talk more sense. I think the public forum is probably going to be the biggest opportunity for input on those street designs.
Okay.
In addition to today's discussion.
So yeah, at least the infrastructure committee would participate in that, and probably the whole committee, if possible. The second task is project prioritization for this capital improvements program. We will, with staff, support the CIP review process and advocate for multiple projects. There will be in September, I think your staff request will be submitted, well, presented anyway, and then later they will be submitted to the council. That will be in October. So our recommendation will help integrate multimodal input from that. And then the third task was developing grant support letters. So we worked with staff to draft support letters for their funding grant application. The 2 primary ones are the LAPD, which is the local ministry program.
Nice. Yeah, that's up.
And then later in January is the community funding area. We would, work with them to develop, total response from our entire group of initial draft. And that's what we have so far, unless I missed anything.
The next was the safety committee.
Elizabeth and I met on the 18th for our first meeting. We also decided not to have chair and co-chair since it's the 2 of us. We addressed 2 of our biggest priorities. The first one being the safety concerns, and I believe it was phrased like the slope of very steep ones. But I think we actually expanded that slightly for more general safety concerns with the use of the bus. Not just the boarding slope, because there were other safety issues that came up as we were discussing. And then the second issue, which I believe we tabled for our next meeting, was the walk to school safety initiative, and trying to focus on concerns safety wise in Apex about families getting from where they are to where their children attend school, making sure that's a safe process. I apologize. Also, did I miss anything?
We had wanted to expand the title of our group to safety and accessibility, which I think are completely linked. I don't know what we need to do formally to see if you all agree with that.
Yeah, I think we do need to have a formal action, and we could bring that in September.
report.
Shannon? Information updates?
So the informational updates were circulated in your pre-meeting packet. I don't have anything specific, but if there was anything that you had questions about, this is the time for that.
I had one question. I noticed the trend where normally with transit operations, when weather gets cold, ridership goes down. Whereas I noticed on this, ridership, as soon as it started getting cold, ridership picked up. And then when it started warming up, it dropped off. Just wondering if anybody else noticed that.
I can explain that is the homeless. Homeless people are filling the bus on those really cold days, cold, rainy winter days. They're not residents. It's the homeless people. You might have 3 or 4 circling per loop.
Okay.
And that's a new phenomenon in my observation. Started since November 1st when Go Carry 9 made it easier for people who are unhoused to go from Raleigh to Cary, Apex. And you can just loop. You can take the 1 and then do the 9 and then do the 2. You can just keep looping on low ridership buses. So, in my opinion, that is entirely what that is. I had a comment. I was glad that you include the missed trips list on the top. It was illuminating and interesting. Go Triangle has an email alert notification system, and one can subscribe for Go Apex Route 1, but we don't use it. And it alerts you when buses aren't completing their routes. I think that's really useful. It's proactive. I know for me, if I see that the Go Triangle 305, if they missed a route because of mechanical failure, I don't ride at all that day or the next day. It kind of gives you a warning that they got trouble on board. So I wish we would use that if the Go Apex problems are as frequent as that list would indicate.
We do have a system for that through the Go Carry app. If you log in and set notifications, you should get those alerts on your phone.
But they're not coming by email, are they?
You can set it to come by email if you want it to.
Okay, then that isn't active for me because mine should have that setting.
You have to go into your settings to enable it, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. But I get those. You know, I've set it up to make sure I get those.
Updates. At this point, we'll just open it up for any other business that wasn't discussed that someone needs to bring up. If not, thank you all for a great meeting. We'll adjourn. Thank you.
Oh, I actually need a formal motion, if I could, for the adjournment.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you.
Motion and second, all in favor for adjournment?
And Ashley, he's back, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Really good about it. Yes, I guess so.
And my minutes show that I'm recording since Chrissy's not here.
Did you say you know something?
I did not.
I think we are.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good night,
Ashley.
thanks.
We still be
Well, tell me what happened? Did you have somebody saying that they would attend, or you just didn't, you couldn't work with it anymore?
Good meeting y'all.